Well, this is Attorney Augustus Corbett, and I got a few comments I want to make about the George Floyd trial. I have been watching this trial for the past couple of days, and as a criminal defense attorney myself, who've tried many cases for the defense, there are some things that are sticking out to me, and I don't think the general public understand some of these nuances about criminal trials. And I want to talk about it a little bit. And as you see, what I'm specifically going to talk about are 7 reasons why Derek Chauvin could indeed walk. In other words, he could be found guilty. Now, I've watched the video many times. And the last time that I watched it, it brought me to tears once again. Because I was witnessing, I don't know if you understand this, but we witnessed a public lynching. That's what we saw. It is the most gruesome and vicious videotape of a police officer killing a black man that I've ever seen, and I've seen quite a few at this point. I remember the Eric Garner case where he was choked to death. I remember Walter Scott getting shot in the back. But for some reason, this George Floyd video really stands out. And we learned from the prosecutor, who did an excellent opening statement, Jerry Blackwell, I think his name is, from North Carolina, by the way, my home state. We learned from him that it wasn't 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but they showed a video that was from 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So they added some time to it. And again, just the most gruesome thing that I've ever seen, as we heard Mr. Floyd beg for his life, beg for his mother, beg for his children, and the look in the eyes of Derek Chauvin and the callousness, the disregard for Mr. Floyd's life by the other officer, the Asian officer, as well as the other officer. I think there was even a black officer. Those 3 additional officers will be going to trial as well. They've also been charged. But I tell you, it is still possible. Unfortunately, it is still possible for Derek Chauvin to walk, to be found not guilty. So let's break this down, and let me tell you why I say that. Again, I've seen the tape. It gets me emotional every time. But I have to take my emotions out of this and approach this like a professional criminal defense lawyer. And when I do that, I see some real concerns on the horizon. So let's talk about what those concerns are. All right, number 1, the defense will get their chance to present evidence. Right now, the prosecutor is presenting its case in chief, and they are presenting all the evidence that they have. They are presenting all of the witnesses. They are presenting what videos they have. They're presenting what, forensic evidence they have. And this is what they're going to be doing. And they're going to be doing this for probably a couple of weeks. But then once they rest their case, then they're going to allow the defense to put on its case. Okay, the defense is going to put on its case. And so we're only hearing one side of this. We're not hearing the defense yet. Okay, we're hearing only one side. And let me make sure you're hearing me. You should be hearing me, but I'm getting some indication that you may not be. But I'm going to proceed like you are because everything looks like you're hearing me. But again, the defense is going to get the opportunity to put on its case in chief. So right now, we're hearing one side of the story. And the Bible tells us that any side of a story seems true until you hear the other side. Well, we know what our eyes see on that video, but the defense is going to put forth its case in chief, and they're going to try and show us that what we saw is not really what we saw. What we see on the video, they're going to try to convince us it's not really what we see, but we know what we see. But I'm telling you, they're going to put on a strong defense. Now, the prosecution is focused on that videotape because the videotape is horrendous. It evokes all kinds of emotions. But the defense is going to focus the jury. And keep in mind, that's all that matters. We're not in the courtroom. We're not on the jury. All that really matters to the defense is the jury. And the defense is going to focus first on causation. Okay, causation. Now, I hope everybody can hear me. I'm getting messages that you can't hear me, but they're going to focus on causation. The defense is going to focus on whether or not Derek Chauvin caused the death of George Floyd. They're going to say, essentially, yeah, the tape shows Mr. Floyd dying while Derek Chauvin had his knee on his neck. But they're going to argue strongly that that was not the cause of death. So they're going to argue cause of death. They're going to say, yes, the video, or at least they should say, if it were me, if I was defending someone in Mr. Chauvin's situation, I would acknowledge how horrific the video looks. I would show some humanity. I would show, some remorse, all right? Just some decency about this man dying in this way. But we would refocus the jury on causation. We would argue and argue strongly that what you saw is not the cause of Mr. Floyd's death. Now, that brings me to the third thing. In order to show causation, or in order to show that Derek Chauvin didn't cause the death of George Floyd, they're going to bring in, the defense is going to turn this case to the experts. All right, this is going to be about the experts. In fact, the prosecution is going to start calling expert witnesses as well. And they're going to try and steal the thunder from the defense. So they're going to put forth, the prosecution is going to, during their case in chief, they're going to put forth experts to show that, yes, Mr. Floyd died because of the neck to the knee. Mr. Floyd died because he basically couldn't breathe. And it was not because of anything that was in his system. It was not because of any, fault or malady of his heart, some sort of disease of his heart, like the defense has stated in the opening statement. The prosecution is going to say, no, that's not true, and they're going to say that through experts. Well, the defense is going to get the opportunity to cross-examine those experts. But not only that, and I'm going to tell you, cross-examination is really, really, really powerful. I love it. I love cross-examining the other side's witnesses. So they're going to try and get everything that they can get out of the prosecution's experts, but they're really going to focus on their own experts to completely refute the case that the prosecution's experts are going to put forth. So the defense is going to take the jury's focus away from the video, and it's going to be about causation as explained through their experts. So they're going to put forth experts to show that Mr. Floyd had health conditions, that Mr. Floyd had drugs in his system, that Mr. Floyd died because of things that were going on with him. So while they're doing that, so while the prosecution is trying to show that Mr. Floyd died because of the knee on the neck, again, the defense is going to be trying to show that it was not the knee on the neck, it was all of these other issues. So they're going to get, you won't see that video again. Let me put it that way. The video is going to go out of the trial when the defense starts. The defense want to completely refocus the jury. Just totally refocus the jury on causation and on the experts. That's their game plan. I as a criminal defense lawyer, it's about the only place for them to go, causation, because the prosecution must prove not only did George Floyd die, but that Derek Chauvin caused his death. And that's where the defense feels like things are going to shift in its direction. Okay? So now keep that in mind. So number one, the defense will get their chance to present evidence. Don't think that because the prosecution is putting forth its evidence right now that's it. That's going to be the end of it. And the jury's going to get the case and start deliberating, and that's the trial. No. The defense is going to get its opportunity to present its case, and its case is going to be focused a lot on causation, and it's going to use the experts to try and show that Derek Chauvin, in fact, did not cause the death of George Floyd. Not only that, the defense will also focus on intent. Intent. Now, let me explain this, because a lot of folks don't realize this. The types of charges that Derek Chauvin is facing, people don't think that it has anything to do with intent, because the way those statutes are written, it's as if they don't have to prove intent, that Derek Chauvin intended to kill George Floyd. But let me show you where intent comes in. The second-degree murder charge basically says something to the effect of the fact that Derek Chauvin caused George Floyd's death unintentionally, but while assaulting him. So that first charge, that second-degree murder charge, yes, says that Derek Chauvin, basically, it doesn't require that the state prove that Derek Chauvin intentionally killed George Floyd, but the intent element comes in because an element of the murder charge is that Derek Chauvin killed, unintentionally, George Floyd while Derek Chauvin was committing an assault. And it's the assault where the intent element is going to come in. So the state must prove that Derek Chauvin intentionally assaulted George Floyd, and it was that assault that actually caused George Floyd's death. So they're going to try to show, the defense is going to try to show that Derek Chauvin was not intending to assault George Floyd, that he was doing what he was trained to do, that he was doing what he has done over his entire career as a police officer, that what he was doing, what he did, and what we saw in the video is what police officers do all the time. It was reasonable under the circumstances. In other words, they're going to try to refute the assault element of the murder charge, because again, that assault element requires that they show, that the state shows intent to assault George Floyd, which caused his death. So they're going to refute that it was intentional, that it was not an intentional assault at all, that he was just doing his job. Fourth, the defense will focus on, again, the science. So the experts are coming in, like I told you, all right? There are going to be a lot of experts, a lot of doctors, a lot of different kinds of doctors. There are going to be lung doctors. There are going to be toxicologists. There are going to be, just a bunch of medical experts giving their opinion as to what caused George Floyd's death. Fifth thing, the defense will focus on George Floyd's character. The judge allowed the defense to play a video of a 2019 arrest where George Floyd ingested some drugs while he was being arrested. The judge thought that that was relevant, and the judge allowed it to come in, and so the defense is going to play that video. Now, that's the only video that they want the jury seeing, and the jury is going to see that. And so the defense is going to go after Mr. Floyd's character, that he was a drug user, that he was doing what he had done a lot of his adult life. He was using drugs. He was high. Drugs was in his system. So that's what caused his death, and that's what caused him to behave the way he did, and that's what caused him to resist arrest. So they're going to attack his character. We knew that was going to happen. They always do that. Whenever a white police officer kills a black man, they're going to go after his character. We know that that was going to happen, but it was quite a bit of a shock and a surprise that the judge allowed this evidence in about George Floyd. So the defense will attack Mr. Floyd's character. Sixth of all, keep in mind, Derek Chauvin is a white police officer. George Floyd was a black man. Well, what does that have to do with anything? It shouldn't have anything to do with anything, but it has a whole lot to do with everything. Why? Because there are a bunch of whites on that jury. There are a bunch of whites on that jury. And the defense knows that those whites approach these police officer killing black men types of cases very, very, very differently than blacks. So what we see as black Americans, when we see a police officer killing a black man, many white people see something completely different. Their relationship with the police department, with law enforcement, historically, is very different than our relationship. And I'm telling you that based on the research, there are very, 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 very few white police officers who are found guilty, even prosecuted. Most don't even get prosecuted. Most don't even get charged. So it was a hurdle getting Chauvin charged, and then because of Keith Ellison, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, he was able to bring the charges, get the grand jury to charge the police officer. That usually doesn't happen. And then convincing a jury that has a lot of white people on that jury to find a police officer guilty of killing a black man who they will now learn had drugs in his system and who took drugs on a prior arrest. I'm telling you, that is a high burden. That's a very tall burden. And why am I skeptical, therefore, from that fact? I'm skeptical because, and this is my seventh reason, the defense needs to only convince or raise reasonable doubt with one of the jury members, just one. The prosecution has the burden of proving its case beyond a reasonable doubt with all of the jury members. But the defense just need to raise doubt with one of them. And they're most likely to do that with one of those white jury members. One of those white jury members, the defense knows if they just keep raising doubt about causation, that the fact that George had drugs in his system, the fact that George took drugs based on the prior arrest, the fact that George had heart problems, the fact that George resisted arrest, the fact that no one's going to say this, but the fact that George was black, that's going to stand out in the minds of some of those whites. Look, it usually does. Let's be realistic here. I'm not painting all whites with a broad brush, but just based on the historical record, they are very, very, very reluctant to find a white police officer guilty of killing black people, a black man in particular. And as the defense said in its opening statement, a big black man who was on drugs with questionable character. They didn't say it that way, but that's essentially what they were putting out there. And they know exactly who they're talking to. They have an audience basically of one. They just need to convince one, just one. So, despite the ugliness of that video, and by the way, I'm old enough to remember the ugly video of the Rodney King beating. I remember that video. I remember them hitting him with billy clubs over 50 times. 50 times. 50 over 50 times. Broke his leg, broke his jaw, broke his arm. And they walked, all four of them. Now, here in Dallas, we have been able to get convictions when police officers kill black men unjustly. We've gotten two in the past several years. But Dallas is different. Dallas has a sizable black population. Dallas has a bunch of black prosecutors, black judges. Dallas is completely different than Minnesota and a whole lot of other places in America. So, again, those 7 reasons just got me concerned. Again, let me tell you what they are. The defense will get a chance to present their case in chief. That's coming. So brace yourself for that. I know the prosecution look real good right now. I mean, they got a strong case. That video, that video. I mean, wow, the video. So it looks really good. And I've seen people on Facebook saying, wow, they got a strong case. Man, you know, they got a strong case. And they do, but you haven't heard from the defense yet. And the defense knows exactly where they're going. And like I said, they're going to the issue of causation. They're going to do everything they can to say, yes, this was tragic. Yes, or at least they should do that. If it were me, I would acknowledge the humanity and how awful it was for Mr. Floyd to have died out there. But I would say he didn't die because of my client, okay? It wasn't because of Derek Chauvin. And that is exactly what the defense is going to do. He died, but it was the drugs in his system. It was the heart problems that he had and all the other stuff that they mentioned in their opening statement. So causation. The defense will also focus on intent. Again, Derek Chauvin was not intending to assault George Floyd, which caused George Floyd's death. They're going to fight vigorously against what we saw being an assault. They're going to say over and over and over again, and they're going to use experts to show that this is the way police officers are trained. Problem is, who are we going to believe, the experts or our lying eyes? I mean, we see clearly the video of a man who's completely subdued, handcuffed. 3 police officers are on him, several on his legs and the back, and Chauvin got his knee on his neck. There was nothing Mr. Floyd could do. So I completely reject the argument that they're going to make with respect to assault, but they're going to make it. The defense will also focus, again, they will focus on the science. This is going to turn hard to the science. Right now it's emotions, but they're going to turn it away from the emotions, and they're going to turn it to the science, to the experts, to forensic experts, to medical doctors, okay? Also, the defense is going to attack Mr. Floyd's character. They've already been doing that, and they're really going to step it up as this trial progresses. Once again, Derek Chauvin is a white police officer accused of killing a black man. Look at do your research. It is extremely rare for a white police officer to get convicted, even charged or indicted for killing a black man. That concerns me. And seventh of all, the defense, remember, only needs one. That's the beauty of our system. Our system puts the burden on the state to prove its case to a unanimous jury in most jurisdictions, whereas the defense has to only convince one that there's reasonable doubt about causation, reasonable doubt about the assault, reasonable doubt as to whether or not Mr. Chauvin was doing his job as a police officer. Now, again, I want to see him get convicted because I think we witnessed a first-degree murder, lynching before our very eyes. But as a criminal defense lawyer, I am telling you that this case is far from over. And one last note on punishment. I looked at the statute, and Minnesota has this presumptive sentencing guidelines. Now, the second degree carries right much time. I think it's 25 years, maybe even 40. But there's a presumptive sentencing guideline which reduces that quite a bit based on the defendant's prior history, record, and all of that. And to my knowledge, Mr. Chauvin doesn't have any criminal record. So he will get the lower end of this presumptive sentencing guideline, which, when I checked it, I think it's around about 10 and a half years, up to maybe about 15. So even if he's found guilty on the second degree, he could get as little as 10 and a half years, which I think is about where he would probably end up, 10 and a half. And then if he's found guilty on the third degree, I think that's about 6.5 to maybe 9.5 years. It has a much greater punishment range, but the presumptive sentencing guideline reduces it quite a bit, again, to about the 6.5 to about 9 or 10 years. And the last charge, the manslaughter charge, I think it's in the neighborhood of 3.5 years. Most of the time, like here in Texas, someone who's found guilty of manslaughter typically even get probation. They typically don't do any time. So the punishment also, even if Derek Chauvin is found guilty, the punishment is likely going to be pretty low, and obviously that's going to disappoint a lot of black folks. You know, if Chauvin, and that's a big if he's found guilty. And by the way, if he's found guilty on all three charges, and there's 10.5 he got to do on the second degree, 6.5 on the third degree, and then 3.5 on the manslaughter. If the judge rules that he has to do that concurrently, then the most he would do is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.5 years and be parole eligible at some point way before 10.5 years probably, and could be out in no time. And that's assuming that he's found guilty. So what I see coming ahead, again, I think may disappoint a lot of us in the African American community who is just tired of seeing this sort of thing, and we want justice for these families. Let's hope I'm wrong. Let's hope that Mr. Chauvin is found guilty. Because of what we saw in the video, that's a lynching. That's a lynching. And I mean, it feels a little dubious coming from me. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. You know, I've represented people who've committed murder, who've been charged with murder. So it's a little weird for me to be saying, let's hope he get convicted. But first and foremost, I'm an African-American man, and that could have been me. A young witness today said when she witnessed this death of Mr. Floyd, she saw her father, she saw her brother, she saw her nephews, her uncles, and I see the same thing. But a lot on that jury do not see it that way. So let's just see what happens. All right. Again, this is Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that helped you understand a little bit more about the George Floyd trial. God bless you.